Welcome back. This video is about the third seal, the rider on a black horse with a pair of scales or balances in his hand. If you haven't seen seals 1 and 2, I recommend you go back and watch that. I actually recommend you go back all the way to the Revelation 12 sign and in-depth study. I go into a lot of scriptures about the stars and constellations and how it pertains to the Bible. And it's a bit of some teaching in there just to help you if you ever want to open up Stellarium, look yourself. It just gives you a bit of more knowledge on how to do it. And so I just want to read now about the third seal. And it's in Revelation chapter 6, verses 5 and 6. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, "A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And see thou not hurt the oil and the wine." That was the King James Version. I just want to read it from my Greek English Interlineary. It's the New Revised Standard Version. So it is chapter 6, verses 5 and 6. And when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature call out, "Come." And I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider held a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures, saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's pay, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's pay. But do not damage the olive oil and the wine." So that kind of sets up what we're looking for and for the third seal. And so let's go into Stellarium and have a look at it. So we're going to start back where we left off, and the rider on a red horse, and it's red because Jupiter has indicated it because Mars is here, Mars being the red planet, Saturn being the witness. So we're going to start here. We're going to follow Jupiter, the man-child, Jesus, as Jesus would say, "Come follow me," and that's how I got here, was from following Jupiter. And he shows us the seals. So we'll start off following Jupiter. It's 9 months until the next seal. So there's, 9 moon cycles. Months, almost. So that was 1 moon, 2 moons, 3 moons, 4 moons, 5 moons, 6 moons, 7 moons, 8, and 9. And as that was 9 moons. So this next moon coming in is going to create an eclipse with the sun. So as it's coming in, we have Jupiter and Saturn about to conjunct in the rider on a horse. We have Mercury ready to conjunct with the sun, and the moon coming in to create an eclipse. Here comes the moon. At this point, I'm just going to hit the sun so we can center on the sun so I don't lose everything. So the moon's coming in to create the eclipse. And there it is there. Okay, so let's go look at the eclipse. It was on December 14th, 2020. Total eclipse was not an annular eclipse like the first seal, which left the corona, the crown. This one's total. It's a black out eclipse. And so we have a black eclipse here. This conjunction here is, in astronomy, it's called the Great Conjunction because it's the most rare conjunction with the 7 luminaries, Jupiter and Saturn, because they are the slowest moving ones out there. So once every 20 years, approximately every 20 years, they get together. However, this Great Conjunction, and it was actually made a big deal of it here, it happens in 7 days. The Great Conjunction happens in 7 days. And that's a bit of a sign in itself, because it's 7 days from this sign. 7 days from then to become the Great Conjunction. Now, this Great Conjunction is the closest conjunction in 400 years. It's been 400 years since they have been this close together. So that is kind of remarkable. Mercury and Venus and the Sun is a 3-in-1 package. Like I've said before, they're a 3-in-1 package. Sometimes Mercury and Venus individually, together, they're used as like messengers, indicators. They will retrograde, go around a certain star to indicate things. They're used as indicators, almost like two hands to point at stuff. So in this one here, Venus is indicating the scales. So I'm getting into the details of this sign now. So we have the scales here, we have the rider on a horse here, the sun in the middle, and we introduce a new character, because the sun is actually eclipsing in Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is like the champion, because he's a champion of the Serpent. Serpent is the only constellation out of the 88 that is divided into two. Actually, when you get into Revelation chapter 12, talking about a dragon with 7 heads, well, this is actually called the head of the serpents. This is the tail of the serpents. And if you count these stars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you got a serpent, a dragon with 7 heads. Up here you have a corona, a crown. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stars there. So we can I'll probably talk about this in another video, because I could go into great depth about this. But Ophiuchus is in the story of Christ, in the constellations. This guy represents Christ defeating the serpent, and his heel is also down here on the head of the scorpion, and the other foot over here is being stung by the tail into the heel of this. And for those who know your word, you'll know what that is depicting: crushing the head and getting stung in the heel. Okay, so let's get back to the sign, the details. Okay, so way up here we have the Great Conjunction, and on the very other end of the sign we have the top of the scales. So the distance between this conjunction and the center of the sun is almost identical to the distance from the center of the sun to the tip of the scales. So it is very balanced in that respect, and it goes along with the theme of being balanced. And there's another a balance in this sign, which is Venus, its position. The line goes through the sun, so the distance between Venus and the center of the sun, and the center of the sun to the center of this constellation, which is approximately here, is also balanced. The center of this constellation and where Venus is a balanced distance between the center of the sun and Venus, center of the sun, and this constellation with the rider on a horse. So this here is your rider on a black horse, because it's a blackout eclipse, holding the scales, because Venus is the arm holding onto the scales. It's a very large eclipse. It expands, sorry, not a very large eclipse. It's a very large sign, because it spans 3 constellations. And I said in the last video, when the Lord chooses the 7 luminaries and the 12 constellations, using them alone to tell a story, how else would things be depicted? How else would someone to tell a story of a rider on a black horse holding the scales? And when I came across this, I actually missed it the first time through. I found seals 1, 2, and 4, and I knew, just within my spirit, I knew that the third one's in there. I just didn't know, and I actually went to sleep. And the next morning, I spoke to my wife, and my wife just happens to be she doesn't follow astrology, because that's the astrology being the counterfeit for what the real meanings of the stars than that mean. But she knew, because other people told her that, hey, you are a Libra. So she always knew she was Libra. I didn't even know she was a Libra until that next morning, and I just told her about it. I said, I can't find the rider on a black horse holding the scales, and she says, well, I've been told that I'm like the Libra of the scales, so why don't you look there? So lo and behold, I zoomed out and found the sign, and when I seen it, I was amazed, and because it's like, wow, that really does tell the story. Okay, so that's the details of the sign. I think it's rather amazing. So let's check out the date, December 14th, 2020. And we know this is talking about the price of food going up, a day's wages for a loaf of bread, a day's wages for 3 loaves of barley. So let's check out what was happening on Earth. And I went through and I started pulling up graphs from around the countries around the world. So at the end of 2020, what happens with food inflation? We see Argentina, it's going up. I live in Canada, so end of December 2020, right here, and then we see it going up. This one here is a global inflation surge, and the end of 2020 right here, and this is everything here, but we're just focusing on the food, and that's the yellow, and you can see here at the end, the yellow just going straight up. Ireland, end of 2020 right here, you can see it going up, and it's going up steep. Like, this is like really steep. The United Kingdom, now United Kingdom's a little different, because the end of 2020, it actually took longer, and as I said in the last video, some people, when the seals are open, they'll notice it right away, and other places won't. It'll take time for it to happen in their area, because, as I said, the Bible is written not just for one specific location. The Bible is written for the entirety of the earth. But it did happen. It just took a little longer to catch up to the UK, and it did go up. Poland, the end of 2020, it went right up. Austria was a little bit like the UK, in that it didn't really start going up until the end of 2021, but then it really went up. And we have, where is this? Oh, Australia, not to be confused with Austria, but this is Australia here, end of 2020, and then it went up, and then it went down a bit, and then it went back up a lot. We have here US inflation, food price inflation is high. So we have here the yellow line, end of 2020, and just going way up. And then we have the EU, end of 2020, and it going way up. So it correlates with what was going on the earth at that time. It's like the beginning of a sharp curve upwards in inflation. So here it is, one last look. A rider on a black horse, because this is total black eclipse right in the center of the sign. This conjunction, the Great Conjunction, and 7 days later, it is the tightest it's ever been in the conjunction that's ever been in 400 years. And then you have Venus over here, that's the messenger, to balance it out. As I said, this is balance from tip to edge in a straight line, balance be halfway, same distance between here and here as it is from the sun to the tip of this, and then another balance between Venus and the center of this constellation to here. So it's balanced out twice here, and it's really goes along with the theme of the rider on a black horse with scales or balances in his hand. So let's go and talk about this a little bit. So that was a pretty amazing sign. It reminds me a little bit of the Revelation 12 sign in that it's more than one constellation. The Revelation 12 sign was two constellations, the Virgin and the Lion. And this one, you had three constellations. You had the rider on a horse, the scales on the end, and then you had the constellation in the middle that it was in Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is like, it's kind of like a hidden constellation, so to speak. It's the 13th constellation. When you look these things up, you'll sometimes see that because the elliptical is there, and there's a degrees to it because sometimes a light will ride high and sometimes low, and that's why you don't always have, every new moon, you don't always have an eclipse because if they were dead on, everything went on a strict line and didn't vary in 1, 2, 2.5 degrees, then every new moon you would have an eclipse, and followed by blood moons or lunar eclipse. You'd always have them, but we don't because they fluctuate. So the 13th constellation, Ophiuchus, it fits in with the Christ story because 12 disciples, Christ is the 13th man, and eventually I'll do a video about this because there's a lot of interesting stuff. If people who like numbers, I like numbers a lot, and like 13 is the 7th prime number, so it's kind of neat because God likes the number 7 a lot. It's everywhere. And so anyway, get back to this. I did the odds of this sign, and it came to 1 in 90 million. And now when I did these numbers, I did them as the numbers were kind of gross. They weren't down to defined, and I could have divided each constellation into the degrees and got bigger numbers, but I just did use the gross numbers to find them. I just wanted to be a little bit modest about this, and because I just wanted to be as honest as possible, because someone could say they did it and they found it was different. So I'm being modest here so that if they actually do it, they're going to get bigger numbers. But anyway, so we take this sign with these odds and with the odds of the other ones, and what I came up with was the number for all these things to happen, the Revelation 12 sign, and then 30 moons later, you have the first seal, 3 moons later, the second seal, 9 moons later, we have the third seal. So the odds of all these things happening, and they're happening in the correct order, and I haven't even added that aspect into it, the fact that these are in the correct order. So this number at the end is going to be it'll be a number that I've never even heard of before. But it's so big that because the seals aren't mixed up, it didn't come red horse, black horse, white horse. It was white, red, black, pale green. So anyway, so far up to this point with the Revelation 12 sign, first seal, second seal, and third seal, it's 1 in 60 nanonillion odds. And that's a new number for me because I had to actually look this up. When I calculated it out, it was 6 with 31 zeros after it, and I didn't know what that was called, so I had to look it up on Google and then look down the list. And it's when you're getting into this bracket, it is nanonillion. So this is 1 in 60 nanonillion. So it's something to teach the kids. Anyway, it's a remarkable thing. Going just observing these things, and that's all I did was just observe them. And anyway, that's it for this third seal. I want to say thank you for popping in. God bless you. I love you guys, and I'll come out with the next video as quick as I can. I'm trying to increase the frequency of these so that I can get these out so people can look at them, share them. Anyway, that's it until the next video.